Greetings and welcome back to another lecture series. My name is Chris Cook. I am an instructor at the English department at the Southeastern Louisiana University. Today we'll be talking about argument essays. Obviously, if you're seeing this, you're probably taking my class and you've seen a nice step-by-step progression from memoir to a review to an analysis, and now we've reached our destination at one of the most important assignments that you'll be completing for this class. Most likely in 101, and then in 102 you'll be doing a lot of argument essays, so this is vital that you sort of internalize the lessons and the techniques today that I'm suggesting. So, to start off with, obviously, a title actually matters in academia. If you're getting an essay published, you want to call attention to your specific argument, your thesis statement. You can use an attention-getting part, but you also might want to indicate your specific trajectory of your essay or the thesis. One of the best ways to do that, obviously, is not this. Argument essay about this. It's a weak title, right? So think about using a multi-tiered title. What we mean by that is you have that colon there separating part one and part two of your title. One part can just be kind of flashy, something that's just a hook to grab your reader's attention. The other part is the part that lets your reader know and indicates either your primary source that you're arguing about or your primary goal, your argument, the direction of your essay. I also see a lot of students ask a question as a title. It's better to tell them which side of the question. So, should we change the drinking age from 18 to 21 and vice versa, stuff like that? Instead of asking that question in your title, go ahead and tell them what your argument is so that someone researching your essay that has been published, because you all have wonderful writing, go ahead and tell them which direction you're going in. That way they can research your essay. All right, so of course we have some typical goals and objectives. I'm going to be looking to see that you utilize evidence to support your opinions. This is super important. I can't express this enough. Lots of students just, assume that they know things, or it's just hearsay, or just something that you kind of grew up knowing. But until you use empirical evidence, I want to see statistics, examples, testimonials from experts in the field. You will have weak arguments. You have to actually bring in reinforcements on this. So we'll talk about that. I want to see you apply those critical thinking skills and your analytical skills in order to make your arguments stronger. You don't just say, oh, well, this is this, this is this. Really dig in deep and think about this and use a thoughtful approach. I'm going to be asking that you use a balanced approach that, thinks about the opposing view. I want to see that you can consider what other people might think, or that if there are any exceptions to the rule, and you actually incorporate that into your argument. You're also going to be integrating research and direct quotes properly. I have another presentation that I've done on this video lecture about using the ICE method, the integrate, cite, and explain method. So you're going to be using that. And you're also going to be considering, of course, the big picture significance. I know you're tired of hearing that now, but it's important, and it's just as important in argument essays, if not more so. Moving on, I've created this acronym because I think this is probably just sort of an easy checklist to figure out if your essay is going in the right direction. A lot of these actually really relates to your thesis statement, so we're going to dig in and focus a little bit more on the ones that are specific to your thesis statement, because it's really important in an argument essay that you have a strong declarative thesis statement. So, look at this acronym. We have success. In order to achieve success, you want to be specific and focused. You want to use arguable and subjective thesis statements. You want to have a call to action that's clear. You want to consider all sides and angles. You also want to use empirical evidence and specific examples. You want to use strong, relevant sources that you integrate properly using that ICE method we've talked about. And you want to identify the significance or the big picture relevance. Right? So we'll get around to that again in a little bit. Let's talk about that first S, specific and focused. Okay. So what I see in a lot of essays is that students use really broad thesis statements that aren't really getting to the heart of it, or you're either trying to tackle all the world's problems all in one thing, or you're just kind of too vague. So we want to see you really hone in, be laser focused about something. So let's look at this thesis statement here. Something should be done about hurricane preparedness. So I've actually taken sort of this from another student's essay. And this is just too vague. What is that something? What are your 3 or 4 or 5 arguments about what should be done? Also, doing this, your thesis statement should not be, mysterious in any way or cryptic. This is not a mystery novel. This is an argument essay. You want to forecast what you're actually doing. So, who should be doing something? Are you trying to motivate citizens in Louisiana along the coast? You citizens of Louisiana should be doing this thing to better prepare for hurricanes. Or do you want maybe lawmakers to change the way things go? So, legislators should draft legislation to do X, Y, and Z for hurricane preparedness, and it matters because it will save lives, right? So that's more specific and focused. And the closer you can get to being laser focused, the better. Louisiana citizens specifically, or people in X parish, as opposed to just, people should do things about hurricane preparedness. Are you talking about people across the entire world? Are you going to try to convince legislators across the entire world? Wouldn't it be better to be specific and focused on something that you can even just send to your local legislator? So when thinking about being specific and focused, think about a couple things. By whom? What should be done, right? What exactly are you proposing? What are you saying should be done? Who's being affected, and why does it matter? And then when should this happen? You can even be as specific as that. All right, so I also see a lot of thesis statements that are just not arguable. They're just observations, or they're just not good for a debate, right? So let's look at the following examples. Right? I want you to read these with me, and then you can kind of tell me if these are objective or subjective, right? Which means sort of an observation or arguable. The recent hurricanes have had a negative effect on the economies of many states. Is that objective or subjective? So what do you think? This is an observation. This is something that you can see, something that somebody could just show up and just hand you a piece of paper and say, this has cost this much money, this many people have been displaced from their homes, there's this devastation. It's just an observation. Hurricanes have had a bad effect on these states. Okay. Look at the next one, though, and now you're arguing something. More money should be spent on hurricane preparedness. Somebody else might be like, no, we're spending plenty of money. We don't want to tax any more people in order, people should just move out of the way of the hurricanes. That would be somebody else's argument, right? That's the counter argument to this. So that means it's arguable. That means it's not just an observation. People might not agree with you on that. Let's look at another one. The most recent Star Wars movies was awful. Now, while some people might say there's nothing to argue there, somebody else might have really liked it, right? That's just opinion-based. That's just an argument. Lots of people could debate about it. That's why we debate about art all the time. Now, look at the next one. I've actually seen thesis statements that sort of look like they might be making that argument that we just talked about. But really, look at this, how this is actually an observation. Many people hated the most recent Star Wars movie, many of them citing weaknesses such as plot holes, bad characterization, and wasted opportunities. So what the student is trying to say here is what the previous sentence was, right? The Star Wars movie was awful. But what they end up doing is wording it and phrasing it like an observation. You cannot deny that many people hated the most recent Star Wars movie. That's just what happened. Many people said they hated it. There's no arguing that, unless it just not a single person on the planet hated it, right? So while this looks like a nice thesis statement that look, I've got my main points, plot holes, bad characterization, wasted opportunities, it was phrased incorrectly. All right, so let's look at a couple more examples. Politicians are having a debate over health care because of rising cost, lack of coverage, and quality of care. That is either true or that is false. It's just an observation. Politicians are having a debate. That's just easily identifiable. You can look at video, you could just turn on any news station, and you can see politicians are debating this. That's an observation. It is not an acceptable thesis statement. However, the next sentence is an acceptable thesis statement. It's arguable. It's subjective. Politicians should create laws that address the current healthcare crisis. Somebody else might say, it's not up to my politicians. I don't want them doing that. I am happy with the health care. I don't need somebody modifying it, right? So that is a subjective, arguable thesis, and your essay will write itself because you have to argue that. These are just some of the examples of arguable, good subjective thesis statements, as opposed to those just observations. They're just not good, right? A call to action. You want to have a call to action, and this will help you really strengthen your essays. I see a lot of students that get unfocused, or their arguments veer all over the place. If you have a specific call to action, it becomes much easier because we know exactly who you're calling to do the thing that you're arguing about, right? So let's give this thesis statement a clear call to action. High school students don't sleep enough, which causes health problems and academic performance issues. So, what's your argument here? What do you want done about this? You might be you're arguing, okay, so high school students don't sleep enough, and some people might argue like, oh, they don't need much sleep, whatever. But what is the student actually trying to accomplish with this thesis statement? I think they're probably saying that high school students should get more sleep, right? And we should care because of health problems and academic performance issues and yada yada. They can explain why that's significant in society. But who is supposed to do something about this? Is this student calling the high school students to try to go to bed earlier at night? Are they calling for parents to enforce bedtimes? Are they calling for nap time at high school? Are they calling for a later school bell so that high school students can sleep later? Are they calling for legislation drafted so that students have to, you know what I'm saying? Like, who is supposed to be doing something here? So if you give it a call to action, if you say high school students should take responsibility for their actions and should get sleep earlier or should go to sleep earlier at night so that they can avoid the health problems and academic performance issues which are now plaguing students across the country. Now we're looking at a stronger thesis statement. You're arguing this is who should be doing this thing. And it gives you much more focus, and then you can aim most of your research in that direction as well. All right, so let's look at the significance and big picture relevance part of the acronym here. I'm going to most likely copy paste this right into your essay if I find that you're lacking, but let's look at this and break this down. Your essay could use a clearer expression of the big picture, long-lasting, society-wide impact or cultural implications. What's at stake here and what's the relevance to your reader, right? I'm going to ask you, who cares? Why should I care? So maybe you are arguing that this thing, right, let's look at that high school students not getting enough sleep thing again. Maybe it's causing them to get into wrecks because they're not getting enough sleep, so they're driving around, they're driving tired, and they fall asleep at the wheel. That could be detrimental to our future because we can end up with more deaths and lose, valuable citizens in our society. Or maybe it's having an effect on people's academic performance, which is making us as a society poorer in knowledge and our intellectual base, right? Just go down the list and answer each of these questions. What are the repercussions if your solution's not implemented? Who's going to be affected? Have you identified a trend or some sort of arc of activity that will actually affect the future, and you are trying to say we need to change direction, right? And this is why. This is what will happen if we do that. So you need to be thinking about these things because that helps to craft your essay as well. That will help sort of shape your essay to where it's going, right? If you have an argument and you're arguing this is where we've been before in the past, and now you're arguing in the present this is what we should be doing, this question right here, what is the significance and what's the big picture, it aims you towards the future. You're pointing at that and you're saying we need to do these things because the stuff in the past didn't work so that we can get to this future that actually matters. All right, so what not to do. I've seen lots of students' essays that try to do things like this. Compare and contrast. They just kind of say, okay, well, some people debate this on this side and they debate this on this side. And they just kind of evenly match it. Here's some negatives, here's some positives. All right, so let's look at an example. I've actually seen someone say, well, sunlight is good because it provides vitamin D, but bad because it causes skin cancer and aging. What's the argument here? There's no argument. It's just an observation. Okay, so sunlight is good. It can provide us vitamin D, and like it's important to our health. But too much of it is just bad. Like it does actually, in fact, cause skin cancer and aging. There's no argument here. What the student is probably trying to say is maybe something along the lines of, um, too much sunlight can cause these things, so it's important to have moderation. People should use moderation when sunbathing or something like that, right? So there's an argument to be made here using these pieces and parts, but you have to weigh these. Which one is more important, or what do you want done about this? Let's look at the second example. This is even worse. Hurricanes are good because they bring families together, but bad because they cause destruction. I've actually seen a student use this as a thesis statement in an essay. This is really problematic because there is nothing arguable about this. Like, what are you supposed to argue, that we should have more hurricanes, that we